Man, God's first creation. Father, son, uncle, brother. On a journey of highs and lows, you were created in the image of God and given dominion in the earth, destined for great things and to fulfill purpose. Join us on Men on Monday as we discuss all issues related to men. We are unifying family, building strong families, building strong futures. Join us on Men on Monday.
Good morning and welcome to another beautiful Monday morning. Yes, we're in Barbados, beautiful Barbados, nice and cool on this Monday morning. We had some showers over the weekend, but nevertheless, it's good to have you with us as you get started on your journey today. I am Marissa Boyce, and today it's all about the Men on Monday. Bishop Edison Bino, Minister Sinclair Brown, Bishop Mark, all join us this morning as we continue our journey looking at the whole aspect of sexual intimacy and even intimacy and what is consent. And funny enough, some people might say, why would we even need to have a discussion about this? But this is a reality for many. Many in their homes are challenged with the fact that what may seem like the norm for many might not be the norm for others. There's also the concept that for many, this is norm, but really and truly, it really just is not permissible according to the word of God. So let's look at what is consent. Good morning to you wherever you are logging in. Let us know where you are listening, whether it's in Barbados, St. Michael, St. Vincent, wherever you are tuned in across the globe. We want to hear from you this morning. Bishop Edison Bino, Minister Sinclair Brown, Bishop Mark Herwood, good morning on mute. And how are you guys doing today?
Hey, good morning. Good morning, Marissa. Good morning, all those listening on Facebook and who might hear this otherwise on YouTube and so on. We just want to continue talking about this topic. And so I just want to extend blessings to everybody. Pray that you would be well informed and blessed by the program this morning.
Well, good morning, everyone. Blessings to you. It's great to be here. Great to be alive in the midst of all that is happening. God is still in control.
Blessings once again. I'm excited. Shout out to Love and Light Ministries International. Shout out to Sharon Ox Pentecostal. We pray that the world is listening and that people can be blessed in the name of Jesus.
All right.
Amen.
So, Bishop Edison, let's recap. We've been looking at sexual intimacy. We had our private Zoom. And today we are looking at, consent part 2. What is it really?
Marissa, a very important question. And as you alluded to, we don't always understand that some relationships are very unhealthy and dysfunctional. And sometimes in marriage, the sexual aspect is not intimate. It is forced. There's no consent given. And you may think that when people get married, that consent is automatic. But still, there must be agreement in terms of sexual intimacy because it's two people coming together and they're having an intimate relationship. So consent has to do with the right to say yes and the right to say no. Yeah. And so you can say yes to certain sexual activities. You could say yes to the whole sexual experience, or in some cases, you may say no. And there are reasons why you might need to say no. So we got to remember that consent is the right to say no. We want to get rid of manipulation. Sinclair would have talked about manipulation. He would have talked about control. Those are things that are negative. And so we got to get rid of the control, the manipulation. He made the statement, sexual abuse without consent is rape. Yeah. Sex without consent is rape, and it's a form of sexual abuse. Let me put it that way. So I think we need to understand that sex is an intimate act. It's ordained by God, but it's to be mutually pleasurable and satisfying. He also made reference to Ephesians, where it talks about the wife submitting to the husband, and sometimes people misabuse scriptures. And they use that scripture to say that the woman must submit to any and everything. And that is not what sexual intimacy is all about. So I think that's just a overview. Bishop Mark would have talked about setting boundaries, right? And setting boundaries is important in sexual intimacy. So I think that that's just a brief recap of some of the stuff that we would have talked about dealing with consent.
I like that, and quite a concise summary of just what we looked at last week in terms of understanding that, you know, it is supposed to be mutually. It's supposed to be a mutual agreement between both parties. Understand that if you don't, it really is abuse. And in that, some people may not be able to wrap their minds around that. But if one partner requires something of another and they don't, and it seems forced, it is abuse, as it would be in any relationship. It is abuse. And also to understand the boundaries. If we can, St. Clair, before Bishop Mark jumps in, what really are the boundaries? Why would we need boundaries? And what would the boundaries look like in such a
One of the reasons we need boundaries is because, as I said, many persons can or don't know or can misappropriate with sex because it's supposed to be a mutual gift. Sex is really a gift, and it's supposed to be by God within the auspices of marriage and respect and love. Unfortunately, we want to segue and give up commitments and all the other things that come with that and jump into it. And many persons, because of unhealthy thoughts and perceptions, believe that you can be manipulative in it, and obviously feel they have an obligation. Because some people can, without knowing it, they don't have a healthy yes or a healthy no. So they would feel, oh, I am supposed to do this, even if it's uncomfortable, or I feel this way, or I feel that way. And at the same time, there's some people that can use it in a manipulative way. We touched on other discussions before. We talked about withholding deliberately. And then we have people now that believe because I am in a committed relationship, therefore I have an obligation to sex, to my partner. And that's why this is important, because rape has been a big thing. I'm not saying that women don't also do this, but I'm just saying majority of the time where we could find persons proceeding without consent, and we find that more on the man's perspective. And we got to take our licks where those are given. And for a lot of women, I've heard women say, oh, they don't want to. Honestly, I've heard a couple women say, as far as Christianity is concerned, because people put this under Christianity, unfortunately, being under a Christian and having a Christian marriage, they actually are repulsed by it. And the reason for that is because that in scripture where they believe and persons are projected onto them that under the Christian obligation in marriage, that you're supposed to always give your husband sex, even if you don't want to or not. And there's some women that they shudder at the thought, and therefore they reject one, marriage, and two, Christian marriage especially. Even if they want to get married, is not, they don't want to come out the Christian component of that. And that's why we're doing this program, because we need to get away from this rape culture and this sexual abuse culture, and it's time that, you know, as men we speak about this.
Yeah.
And that especially goes back to the verse that we quoted about submission, where it seemed to be taken out of context. And as you said, Minister St. Clair, about the fact that there's some women who really abhor the thought of it, because it is not considered as a beautiful, but actually abusive. Bishop Mark, go ahead.
Marissa, just before Bishop Mark comes in, I wanted to clarify something, because Minister Sinclair used a very important word. He mentioned the word obligation. Yeah. And we have to understand marriage is a responsibility and sex is a responsibility. So if we go to 1 Corinthians, for example, it talks about our bodies belonging to our partner and so on. What that is not saying is that the spouse is obligated or forced to do something that they don't want to do. What it's saying is that marriage, in the context of marriage, there is to be sexual intimacy where people agree to that sexual activity and don't unnecessarily withhold sex from the from the other person, because some men and some women feel like I must do this, I must have sex, I you know, whether I want to or not, I must do it, I must be able to perform, and that sort of thing. And that's not what the Bible intended at all. It's not meant to be an obligation where you feel forced and compelled and this unpleasant and uncomfortable. I really don't want to do it, but yeah, I have to do it. You know, like the Victorian era, when they used to talk about sex in the Victorian era, the woman just was supposed to lie down there and take sex because, you know, you got to produce children. And so it was looked at from a procreation point of view, and it was meant to be unpleasant, painful, not pleasurable. But really, that's not how sex should be. So when we talk about obligation, we're not saying that we don't have a responsibility to our spouses to give them sex, but we are not forced to do it. It should be an act of love and not an act of compulsion.
Yeah. Well, a very good point
that is
there,
a quote
Bishop.
there, acts of love and not compulsion. I like that. I like
yes,
that.
it was just, that's correct. And you see the love part, you know, when we commit to marriage and a relationship, it's not all about us getting, you know, that's my pet thing, that it is about coming into the relationship to give. If everybody giving, you're gonna get. I'm telling you, if you give, you will get. But I like, and it's very important that we understand that key thing that was mentioned by Sinclair and also by the Bishop is this whole thing about setting personal boundaries. Right, you have to understand. Maybe we should do a program later down the road about boundaries. There are books about it, boundaries, because we come into the marriage, and you know my word all the time, with a lot of misconceptions. Men come in with this macho thing. When they want sex, they must have it. That's the only way I can relax. That's the only way I can work hard and come home. And the only way I can feel love is if I get some sex. Before understanding that love says if the wife is having a problem mentally, physically, whatever, it is important then to have the love to understand that. But he going to take a cold shower, do whatever else y'all can do to get yourself satisfied, or you know, the wife can help you with, and so on. But it's important to understand that you must have personal boundaries, respecting your partner. In too many coaches, I this and I that, because you come along with the concept that the man is the animal when it comes to sex, and when he gets sex, that's submitting. That's not submission, because you still must show. You want submission, but you still have to show or love your wife as Christ loved the church. How many times we didn't flow in what God wanted us to do, and God was still with us. It's the same thing. If you have a situation where you can't get what you want when you want it, you have to understand that you have to give way, right? You have to communicate, honey. Why don't you, honey? I feel like it today. We hope that the lady's not, you know, misrepresented the truth by saying she has a headache, but you must give the person the benefit of the doubt. So I think that boundaries, having respect for each other and what each other is feeling at the time. What happens otherwise too, there are women who are very active, you know, as you call it, the light, you call it Sinclair, the libo, the light, anyhow, that big word you use. It's small, but the big word. You know, you find a lady, oh, he ain't notice me, he ain't love me, he ain't want to have sex. The poor man probably struggle, you know, he's stressed, so he can't, this particular head here thinking, he's so stressed, he can't focus on getting, you know, the other one under control. So it is important, the boundaries be set, and I always say all the time, love and communication. Let me communicate. If you don't get sex, you're bonging on Monday and I get it Monday, man, I can hold on, darling, I love you, I can kiss you, hug you instead, and we'll see what can happen by Wednesday. That's my view.
I like the fact that, you know, we understanding boundaries and maintaining, and also mutually between each other, because very often, and I'll say this, one of the things as we've been talking, I often think about the fact that one person may be at one point mentally and another person is at the other point mentally, whereas Sinclair would say the libido, right, functions
right,
at one.
That is
that's
it.
The word.
That is it. Yes, that's the word. Sorry. Thank you.
Where it functions at one level and another person functions at another level, and to understand that the mutual response to each other must be there, and boundaries. So if a person says, you know, okay, not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe you're tired, and if we understand, men, ladies, as we've learned on our show, that if a man is stressed about so many other things, it affects what really happens in the bedroom. It generally does. I don't know if Sinclair will appear, but I'm sure that women can attest to that all over. That there's really a correlation about what happens with the stress versus also what happens the management of stress versus what happens with in the bedroom. And it's to
Mhm.
understand that. Just as a man needs to understand that if she says, no, I don't like this, no, I don't like that, to be respectful of that, just as she must also be respectful of that. As Bishop Bino said, that it's also about the I was looking for that, an act of love and not compulsion. And I'm
Mhm.
going back to a comment that was shared earlier by one of our viewers, where she said that I'm going to share this comment with you. She said, I've heard many conversations with men saying, oh, my wife could never tell me no to sex. And I was bewildered to say the least. And this is really the reality for many, and especially within Christian relationships. Go ahead, Minister Sinclair. Let's address that.
Yeah, because when things in the culture, and we spoke about this the last time, the bartering system. Yeah. The whole thing of, even languaging to both men, your sons and your daughters, don't find a man that can't gain nothing, or women saying, I got this to buy after sexual intimacy. There was always this conversation about money or something like that. So there's this barter system between money and sex, or gifts and sex, or there's always an exchange, and people don't have sex for free. So there's that ideology there, and it builds up a system that where people feel that if I do this, I have an obligation to this. So take this thing into marriage, where a person is, oh, we are married now, so there's a barter. I'm giving you commitment, now give me sex. I've given you monogamy, now give me sex. And that is where we taking that same ideology of, this is mine, and because I buy you a drink in the club, so I get to dance through the whole night. It's a whole set of bartering systems that we have in our head. So we are now going to a marriage. The man said, oh, I've forsaken all others, so
Mhm.
you're mine. So monogamy.
Mhm.
And going a little bit to what Bishop Bino said earlier, um, the thing about it is that, in the past we got married because of economics, because of social constructs. So you will find that in the older texts, older novels, that people would have got married because to produce children for war. There were economic reasons, there were social reasons, but it wasn't for love. So you'll find a lot of the old Victorian stories that people would have gone outside of the marriage for love. Yeah, so they would get married for whatever reason, but then it would be the whole thing of I found love outside of the marriage. We read a lot of those
Mhm.
old texts, and likewise. However, in this society now, in the new era, get married for love. Yeah, so when people actually go outside the marriage, we get a problem, because if we're married for love, then what are you looking for, right? So we have this thing of consent, where if I'm not getting the sex here, even some
Okay.
people use that as a bartering tool. Oh, if you don't give me any go outside, or they use the fact that because I went out of the marriage is because I wasn't getting it here, and that also brings in another set of can of worms in this, because we was listening to a message in there, and it was true, because the victim of infidelity is not necessarily the victim in the marriage, right? So because a person stepped out doesn't necessarily mean that they're the person that's guilty, and they're two different things altogether. So because we attend the last program of manipulation, yeah, and people withholding deliberately, and when a person is stranglehold, be it men or women, and then when a person go out, and maybe that way we want to talk about consent in a vacuum here. We'll be talking about a person forcing themselves. We're not talking about any manipulation, all those things, but a person forcing or deliberately making a person believe that they have to do this thing
Mm-hmm.
against their emotional and physical will. And that is a very major thing in our society, and that's something we need to eradicate, as the bishop said, a level of self-control, because what he says to have the intimacy rate at the end of the day, it is just to release myself, but there
Yes.
is no connection. The whole thing for sex, and that's the issue. I do believe that we all sexually, crazy, right, and not intimate. We've lost the idea of understanding this something called intimacy. Anybody could have sex. You know what I mean? That way, prostitution is the oldest occupation in the world, because anybody can have sex. It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take any skill. It doesn't take any imagination. It doesn't take, anybody can meet up and hook up and friends with benefits. That is easy. You know what I mean? But to have intimacy, which is very giving, and there's nothing more satisfying. And let me talk to men here, where your woman is willingly giving herself to you. You know what I mean? There's nothing that surpasses that. So it is a cheap shot of forcing yourself or making a person believe that because we're in this union, and especially as a Christian, I really want to talk to my Christian brothers here, that is a spirit that we need to get deliverance from. Yeah, that every time we have to take a text and make a person feel probably force submission or force fear and make a person feel guilty to do something that is against their will or their emotions is abuse. So that's a very nasty spirit, and we need definitely to address that.
I want you to stop there. Stick a pin there. I'm sharing a comment here by Naomi. Many people have sex without a connection and leave as attachments. Now, I want you to, let's go back to something you just said, where you talked about the fact that the woman giving of herself. Break that down. Let us understand what that really would look like. And I know I hear Bishop Mark speak about it all the time. You know, let's explore what that really is when the woman can give of herself freely and consensually rather than feeling forced. If you can break it down, that they understand that it can happen. Go ahead.
Very quickly, not every time you want to have sex, it doesn't mean that you can give sex even if you don't want to. And that's because you're in a love relationship. That is like anything else. So we're not saying every time you want to have sex is you're saying don't want to have sex. Many times my wife may not feel like having sex, but because she loves me, she wants to give me sex. You see? And we talk about that where at the beginning she may not feel like it, by the middle she actually okay, let me join this drink. Are you enjoying this stuff? I'm saying to you. So it's not every time at the beginning you have to, oh, I'm not in the mood or I don't have the feelings and all of that because then you can find yourself in a very unhealthy space. Okay, because marriage is about giving. Not every time my wife asks me to do something, I feel like doing it. It's not about my feelings, right? So we're talking about giving. So the true gift of a person, and it's same thing with the gospel. Not every time that God asks us to do something that we feel like doing it, but we do it because we love God. We know He loves us. So like Bishop Mark always talk about the whole thing of giving, and I know sometimes he makes it sound so simple because that's his heart and his wife, and thank God for them. But many people do not have that concept in their head. How do I give? I don't feel like giving right now. So what am I supposed to do? Give it myself, and I don't feel like it. What if I don't feel like it? No, we've gone into the other part of it, and then that's what made this consensual thing so weird because the person says, "Well, if I don't feel like I don't feel like it." No, you may be in an unhealthy space now as a person because you're using consent as a form of manipulation and abuse to your partner, right? Because saying, oh, I don't feel like it. And we don't giving now is the fact that I know my wife, I know my husband, and I'm willing to give to them, you know, even some days if I don't feel like doing it. And I was saying this is the part of love that kicks in. However, we're talking now a little bit, as I said, where it goes into abuse. And I would say there's a very thin line, and we give some rules to that. But giving freely is having that love for that person that I want to see them pleased, I want to see them satisfied. And let me say this, any man that really, really loves his wife, or really, really love his wife, there is no bigger part. Let me say to y'all ladies, the biggest part is not for us to have the orgasm. Any man that really loves his wife, trust me, the best part of intimacy is when she's having her orgasm. Every man is feel like, we would tear off the roof just for that. So it's not about us. We could go in the bathroom and start it ourselves. So that is what we want to to give ourselves freely and honestly in a relationship.
Yeah, well, we going into some serious stuff here, but again, coming back to this giving thing, as the question that Marissa had asked, it is important too, and I think this is where a lot of problems come. You see, communication, very important. And let me show you what I mean. Now, you could have an issue as a woman when your husband wants it, but again, how you handle the man. For example, I can't. You can't understand that. What I'm saying is, could it not be a case, and this for both partners, where you provide an alternative? We discussed earlier things about oral sex. We talk about sex toys. We talked about these things, and we're not the toys in the way people doing crazy things with them. We're talking about in the bedroom where we are seeking to. I remember we had some serious questions asked to us in our Zoom, where you are seeking to help your partner. So if a man come and he's charged, and you are not well, you have to be able to do other things. You have to be able to provide alternatives, and there must be communication, right? You must I can't say enough about this, because you cannot come into a relationship only thinking about getting, and it comes back again to the mindset as we discussed before. We must well put certain restrictions. A man does his own restrictions, and everybody according to what their past was and what their culturalization is or was, they bring that into the thing, and then nobody ain't moving. I think they say everybody want their way. The Bible says you must, when they want it, it is mine. I sign for that, and all these kind of things. Then really and truly, as a couple, you have to work on a situation. I don't like to, the way I say, draw your line. I remember in our the early part of our marriage, and that's when I say early, that's about 9 years after we had a wonderful time throughout. But she did say to me one time, things get a little samey, darling, and I argue with you and thing, but things a little samey. Listen, from the time she said that, I don't know if she would talk about it, but anytime you butt up on her, ask her. From the time my wife said that, I made sure she could never say it to me that samey again. And there are times as a man, she would tell you, as a man, and I'm 9 years older than my wife, and I getting down now. But the point is, I see my wife, and I see her again a little flustered about me not really turning up on time or on the right amount of times. But I mean, every effort, I care how tired I is. I don't care. I don't have to go out for an hour, 10 hours, but I can make sure I notice her. And let me tell you, when I do maybe the short around, she goes to sleep like a baby. Why? Because it's bigger than the sex. Is that she want to be with her husband. She want to feel love. She want to feel a part of him. So whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and not in the 2 hours, because by that time she probably going to sleep bored. But I'm saying you have to work in the atmosphere that you are in and know your partner and willing to give up, right? And I give you all one more story. Remember, there was a game that I got a little caught up on called Zuma years ago on here. And one night my wife decided to do something really the negligee and so on. And she came, but he doing stand up like a model. And foolish me, but thank God for the spirit. I said, all right, honey, come in there. And it's just that this side of my eye realized, that was something red and sexy. Listen, I said to yourself, listen, no, this can't happen. And I turn off that thing and head straight. So I want to know where straight so it's going on about me, but I head straight. So what I'm saying is that is what's flexibility. Then she has to understand that there are times as a pastor, a teaching, a stress, honey, let me program this for next week. It can't happen this week. Sorry. And we work with it. And that's my testimony. I don't know what. So, and I agree with Sinclair that there are people though who can't get their things done. They're so lick up already, so damaged already, so got self-esteem issues and all those things. And so it's difficult for them to respond in the way that we are discussing. But men, if you are there, you can't deal with it, again, frustrated and so on, you people need to get counseling. And I say that, and we say that here every time.
Because I've just been asked the question, what about, you're talking about sex, but what if you don't enjoy sex with your spouse? What
has to be worked on. Has to be worked on.
You get therapy. You get therapy for that.
Yeah,
have to.
Yeah, get therapy for that. Yeah, because
you say that Sinclair, but you know that there are many men who would tell you what. On what tier I don't want to counseling to do what I got to learn about sex. You know what? Again, the misconception. And not only that, a lot of times the reason you don't enjoy sex with your partner is one, you have not taken the time to really learn. Because if you get them excited, you will get excited too. And secondly, you come with a lot of, again, my favorite word, misconceptions as to what sex is.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to jump in there too, and Bishop Mark and Minister Sinclair can look at this even more, but we want to even look at why people will force sex, because I think that's something that needs to be explored, because sometimes you have to look at a person's upbringing, you have to look at what they learned about sex. As Minister Sinclair would have mentioned, some people are addicted to sex. And that's another consideration. Some people have been influenced by certain pornography, and in that type of pornography, the sex is supposed to be rough and you jump on top of the woman and take advantage of her and all sorts of things. So I think it's important to really explore some of those misconceptions that people have. Why are you forcing sex? As we say, sex should be something that's intimate. It should be something that persons agree to, but sometimes that's not the case. It becomes forced. So if we could talk about that a little bit.
You mentioned something very powerful there, Bishop Lino. The thing about people that having this addiction to sex is very similar to a person that's addicted to sugar, cocaine, heroin, marijuana, coffee, because a lot of people have tied when they're in high anxiety or emotional places, and the way they have been taught as a child
Release.
is the release is through this sex. So the sex is
Yes.
really a drug of
Very
sorts.
true.
And there are women now, and that's really there's an even playing field here. There's both men and women in the spectrum, equally so, that will demand sex. And that's where the consent thing gets very, very strange when we go into the extremes. Because there are women that they will demand sex from the husband if he is not capable of it. Um, because of the unhealthy nature in relation to sex. And he's not enjoying it either because it just becomes a job and an obligation. And she gets aggressive. There are some women that literally beat up the men or threaten the men because this thing is like burning on the inside. So we talk about something that being unhealthy. And there's some men that are like that where their ideology and the cases that I've dealt with like this, it goes back to childhood. There are a lot of people that the sex was used as a pacifier. And to undo that, we talk as a child, where sex has been tied to to down regulate from anxiety, right? So you must understand we go through several types of anxiety during the day, and because it's like they have one of the extreme personalities, and they will be using sex to down regulate. So you may hear a person say, "Oh, I have sex 3 times a day," and it sounds really good, but there are many
Mhm.
people that they have tied it emotionally and subconsciously to any type of triggers emotionally. So you must understand where we talk about libido, which is one thing. That's something totally different. Where a person now is addicted to sex because they use it as a deregulator of their emotional state. So they'll be demanding sex 3, 4, 5, 6 times or whatever, be it male or female. Why that may sound good over a weekend, you know, me come visit me, it's different to come live with me. But once again, when you're doing 6 months to a year, no, that becomes a problem. Yeah, it sounds very exciting for short term, but that is nowhere the abuse thing. And we talk about when a person is sleeping and a person having sex with a person and or a person on medication or even putting something in their drink, you know what I mean, or their food and they fall asleep or they don't recognize, okay, I seem to have had sex last night, but I can't remember it. And that's where a lot of the legal ramifications and the illegal ramifications are really the extreme of abuse kicks in, right? And that is something that definitely takes therapy to unravel that. So that is not a case of, oh, libidos, we talk about something totally different in that case.
All right, I want to go back to a comment that was shared earlier. This comment, but it says sometimes older people must remember the change of life that plays a big part in sex change. Um, they both can have different feelings that can cause breakups in the relationships. So it's to even understand that life changes at different seasons, and I remember hearing Mark say this in a previous program that, and we've said this, people evolve. The person you were when you were 21, 22, it's not the person
True.
you are now in your 50s, in your late 40s, going into 50s, your 60s,
60s.
and
60s.
and your sexual experience will differ. And I want to say this, now that you said that, Bishop Mark, I think we have, and I'll say this, and I'll take my licks for it, I will. Too many women think that as they get older, that sex is no longer a thing. It should be put up on a shelf, and
Very true.
so the relationship dies in that area, and they're married, so the relationship
Mhm.
dies in that area because, as you know, menopause has happened, the body has gone through changes, and what you were doing at 23, 24, you're not clearly now doing at 60.
Mhm.
So it looks different. So my thing is, we must understand that you can still enjoy, have sexual intimacy and enjoy it. Hear about men in their 70s, fathering children. That means there's still some level of competence that is still that can still happen while you're in your latter years. So I think we need to address that misconception also, that you know you don't put up yourself on a shelf, if I can say that. and address that. I'll take my licks if I use that term, but to understand that it's still an act that can be enjoyed, just like going for a walk, going to the beach in your latter years, and not only in your younger years. Go ahead, Sinclair. I know you want to say something.
Yeah, I was going to jump in there actually before Mrs. Sinclair, but I was going to mention something that he's accustomed mentioning, that the body goes through biological changes. So when you're young, testosterone high, and you can just stand up straight at the drop of whatever, and then eventually the man goes through certain biological changes, and the woman goes through certain biological changes as well. So you have the decline in the testosterone, and that the decline in that affects your libido and so on. So you do go through biological changes, and sometimes you can go through physical changes in the sense of you get diabetes, you get hypertension, you get these non-communicable illnesses that affect your sexual performance. So you may not then have sex as frequently, but it doesn't mean that sex has to come to an end. It just means that it might not be as frequent, whereas it used to be every day, twice a day, whatever, where it used to be multiple times in the day, etc. It might be now that it might come down to twice a week, or once a week. But whenever it happens, it needs to be mutually satisfying. It still needs to be something that you invest in. The wife still prepares herself and doll up herself. The husband goes and gets ready and so on. So it can still be very, very meaningful, even though it is not as frequent. Yeah, but you can have a situation where the man has dealing with diabetes and so on, and having problems with erections, and the wife gets upset and begins to abuse him. You're a man, that sort of thing, and that is again the negative side of things, and we don't want that. So sex, as you said, Marissa, it can be very enjoyable even as you get older, but there are going to be some changes that you need to adapt to. Yeah.
Well, my thing, I think that is the main issue is the fact that once again, and I think that's the Lord's really pressing on my heart, where we talk about sex and intimacy, because we are so orgasm driven. You know what I mean? Is like the whole thing orgasm, right? Which is different than intimacy, right? And I've watched couples transform their bedroom by understanding that we don't always have to be orgasmic. It doesn't always have to be a penis and vagina episode. And we talk about intimacy, we talk about touch, sensual touches. And I'm saying the orgasm comes to you. So the thing about even if the guy has erectile dysfunction, and some women, that is it. From the time you don't have erection, so it's canceled. And the man is there like hurting, like, you know what I mean? Even if he's not, erection is not, he's not static at attention 100%. It is, throw your hands in the air. And that's the whole thing of understanding intimacy. Intimacy is bigger than sex. And even if a lady, she's going through menopause, once again, we talk about giving. If you're accustomed giving beyond your feelings, you can give even when you're going through the menopause. The challenge is we are so accustomed to it is about my emotions. And let me carry this right to worship. Even when we're worshiping church, it is about my emotions. If you listen to a lot of Christians, it's about the worship leader or my song. When it's my song, like, my song. When it's not my song, they say, no. Who we really worshiping? Who we really giving it to?
That's right.
You understand? So we ain't really giving it to God, Oh, worship was so good. They had a real good time.
Real good time.
But did God have a good time in it? Did God have a real good time in it? So the truth of the matter is, we are so accustomed to it being about me, instead of giving. So even if I might love some things for my wife to do, and she's not doing them, does that mean that I recall my intimacy? Do I not see her as that? So I'm just saying why does it always have to be a barter system? And the challenge is, as Bishop Mark says, like time, is we're giving, but we've not come to that space where I can give beyond my feelings. So I'm going through menopause. I feel like it. So a shot.
Right.
But
everything shut down.
But in mostly times is more often than not, same thing with libido. And it confuses me when I have guys with libido issues where they don't have a desire. I said, to the hell with your desire? Ask you a question. Your wife here is burning, and she's locked into a committed to relationship in marriage. Talk to me. You know what I mean? But we are so accustomed, if I don't feel like doing it, that is my governing agent. Yeah, and that is really the real issue. When it comes to a little bit to a lot of women, I find, however, they do not see themselves as sexual. When we talk about women going to menopause, a lot of Christian women do not see when it comes to them being a sexual being, they have a hard time conceptualizing that in their mind. So you'll find that females that do have to see themselves as sexual, menopause doesn't change anything. So it's a psychological understanding of my relationship with sex. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
if
I
a
think
female has, go ahead, Bishop Mark.
yeah, that sort of cross you there, but that's a very
Mhm.
important point. You know, this whole thing about how persons see themselves, and then you find because again how they have been culturalized, they hold on to this thing about menopause. But you, as you know, all of us know that in terms of as consonants, so on, there are things that a woman can do during this period. For example, if she doesn't get have the vaginal secretions and so on to make the sex more comfortable. There are things that can be used, but you must have the will to give. So yes, I'm going through menopause, but can't we get the right counseling, seek to find out what can be used, what tablets, what lubricants, so that yes, you will have your time where you can get into your hot flashes and so on. But why can't there be a scheduled thing that, look, honey, give me a couple days, everything, let's get what we need to get to make the thing more pleasurable. I will give up. Yes, I don't feel it, but I can give it up for you. Because when things did when I first met you and I got you foolish behind me now, and you can't do it without me, I have to make provisions to make sure you're satisfied. Because we're the hot and the young gun thing, and we can do all over the house and all across the thing and whatever we're doing. And now that things are difficult, you closing off. But you gotta understand, menopause, you gotta understand. No, yes, we understand, but what has to happen is that we have to make concessions on both ends. I cannot pressure you for 7 days a week, including Sundays, but darling, you can go and give me at least a couple of days. Because if I stress, and you know for years that's how I get my stress organized. Yeah, I love you, but that's helped me too. So we have to work on that. So you're very right there, Sinclair, in terms of highlighting that, because you must be able to, and even in the midst of the difficulties, to do what is necessary to make sure, as part of the giving process and the love that you profess, to make sure, though, despite you having your challenges, that you don't leave the person out the cold because you have a legitimate excuse. You know, sometimes we got good reasons, but that yes, then we feel that gives us a good way to don't do anything at all. And I think that's where the whole thing breaks down. Right? It must be about the giving and loving, the loving and the understanding and the communicating, and we could go on and go on.
You know, I
Just
often
jumping to
remember you say,
quickly.
Bishop Mark, that when it comes to we are very often forgiving and considerate of others, but when it comes to our spouse, it goes through the
Very
door.
difficult. Yeah, many
It
times.
goes right through the door.
I say come in
So
here and
true.
say some men don't take the time to understand menopause or even have a discussion with their partners about it.
About it.
I want to
Correct.
say to you also, Sonia, that as a therapist, I can tell you that a lot of women don't understand menopause themselves.
Themselves. True.
Yeah. So it is, if a man is outside of you, yeah, he's outside. He doesn't have a clue. He doesn't understand what that feels like or what it is. And many women asking a man to understand. Women don't even understand about other women. I find that some women don't have a compassion or
Yeah.
empathy for other women when they're going through menopause. Yeah. So I'm saying as a therapist, that's one of the reasons I go through discussions and educate about menopause, and therefore language is so the man can understand. Right? So yes, it can come off as though the man doesn't understand, and as some men, yes, don't.
Mhm.
But I'm just saying, first, a woman has to understand for herself, and then have a place to communicate it, or find a person or a therapist to discuss it. I remember recently,
Andrea Harris had a show on
Andrea
it,
Harris had a show on it.
Women of
It is
Excellence,
Black People
and
Before.
they spoke
And the
so
amount of
openly.
women and the
Yeah.
amount of women that were grateful for that information. And we talk about in an era, right, where information is given, and so many were blessed by it. So if women are not being blessed 2 weeks ago about menopause, Kadir, you can understand why your man don't get don't get like making excuses for
Yeah.
us in any form or fashion. But I'm just saying it takes time to understand this journey, because the same way many of us do not understand sex and intimacy and a whole set of things. It takes a journey for us to understand menopause. And as I said, that many people don't see sex as a good thing. Even that affects the way we're going through menopause and we're getting older. We like, oh, that's when I was younger, but now I gotta respect myself. And you've heard that term, I gotta respect myself. Yes, yes, Marissa. I know. Deliverance in the name of Jesus. But say some people see sex as not a good thing. So they see sex as a bad thing that Christians get to do. So now I'm getting older, that was when I was younger. I'm not no longer a spring chicken. So all these are psychological things. The last one in relation to this is something called emotional detachment. If I am not a very emotional or comfortable with emotional aura, as I get older and then I don't have the libido to drive me towards it, because libido is going to give you, oh, scratch this itch. So if I don't have that thing pushing me towards scratching the itch, and I'm already emotionally detached, I would not go and seek um, that intimacy, that touch from my spouse. And what can happen is that I can get my emotional gratification now from my grandchildren, from my children, from church. So I'm being satisfied emotionally, right? So I don't know need that from you necessarily. And especially now we talk about the physical part. I have no desire for the physical, but the emotional now I can get supplied from other areas. So now by the time I get into my bedroom, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I don't feel like it. And that's where the consent will get weird because the other person now is dying for that level
Yes,
of
it is true.
intimacy.
Yeah.
But this person totally satisfied emotionally. I have no desire for the physical.
You know, that's a place that a lot of people actually reach in their latter years, where especially women, they resort to that because there's a deficit somewhere, but they resort to that, and that's their way of keeping their I guess their harmony, and their emotional balance in place. But that's the reality. That's the place that a lot of women are at. So we have like 10 minutes before we say goodbye. Any closing words as
Well, I had a
we
question that I think it would be good to answer. Minister Sinclair, Bishop Mark, how do you deal with a woman who feels as if sex is always being forced? Yeah, I mean, from the time the person get married, it just seemed like this is all they know. Sex is always being forced. So, kind of want you to speak to that.
Well, I will start off. Well, if you see, my first question would be to that person is, this is the question. One, how long have you been married to start? But have you ever had, or the persons that might go through this, uh, discussion with your spouse about your how you feel about the whole thing? Because again, a guy might be depending you because he might be good too, and he's satisfying you, and you're keeping all the relevant noises. You're making him feel he's doing, and in his mind, he's thinking, well, look, this is exactly what you want, but he had never heard you want say. Honey, I feel a little pressure, darling. You know, I enjoy you, but sometimes I feel like if it's more of a chore. And here's where I come back to this thing all the time. People get married to better for worse, for thicker, for richer, for poor. And when these things come, because there's a lot of communication, the channels are so loose that they can't sit down and say, honey, it is too much for me. I'm a bit overwhelmed. Let me pace ourselves. Let us think, I feel this way. When you come in, all you think about, you don't think about the vertical at all. Bam. Everything ends up. When we got serious business, everything got to be in the bedroom. But you have to put that out there. And I think, I don't know the situation for the question, but if you're in that position and you would have given your view and then somehow your spouse doesn't understand, you got to seek help. That's all I can suggest, because the only reason I can say that would happen for such a long time is if there was not open communication of you being able to express that this is a problem for you. And then the man, if he's a loving husband, I really appreciate, should make whatever concessions that are required in order to make you feel less that way. That would be my, in the interest of time, my little summary.
Very quickly, and maybe we could continue. I don't know, Marissa would decide. But these are some of the reasons that people do this, and Bishop Mark said. Some people, as Bishop just mentioned, some people they would have been forcing themselves on the person, right? Where there's just this whole rip, basically. But on the other hand, which is where it gets ticklish, where a person did not vocalize or verbalize it. And some people in their mind, they would say, but I made a commitment, so I feel I need to. Yeah, that's one. A person says, I don't want to let my partner down. So you have this servant mentality. They're doing it, they don't feel it, but they don't want to make the person feel less than. I don't want to look stupid. Some people will continue because they themselves, I don't want to look foolish. I don't want my partner to think that I'm stringing them along. This is a big one. where a person might, in their head, would feel, I let the person this part, and I don't want to make them feel as though I manipulate them or whatever, and they go along with the process. And the last one, they're not sure if they want sex to stop or not. In their head, they're trying to work out, I want sex to stop or not. They're in between these two spaces. But they're allowing this thing to occur, as Bishop just mentioned. There was no communication of, I don't want this. But here you have a conference, or you have a counseling session, and the person gets up and says, oh, I'm on me forced. And the person going like, what? You know what I mean? The person is shocked because the spaces
never heard it before.
They were not healthy in their communication. And that is where the two comes in. And like what Sonia says, even in relation to her menopause, is that they talk. And a lot of people, as much as they believe communication, I want to say healthy and effective communication. A lot of people talk, but they don't communicate. A lot of people are talking.
Yeah. You don't hear the other person's heart. They don't hear them. You know, I could share, but you don't. And then it's also hearing about understanding, and then we put the necessary changes in place that we're all working in harmony. It's interesting that you said that with that question that Bishop Bino just asked, and I'm asking again, communication. But the reality is that the way that I may talk to St. Clair is not the way that Bishop Bino might talk to his wife. And Bishop Mark may communicate with his wife, so that you understand that we are hearing each other. Let's go back to the fact that menopause happens. A woman is going through the changes. She might not understand it, so she's not even able to communicate it to her husband, that this is how I'm feeling. I'm tired. I'm weary. And all the other emotions are in place. The hormones, which affect it greatly. If you listen back, I will tell you, ladies, gentlemen, go listen to that program that was on Women of Excellence on their page. I'll even share it to our page. It was mind-blowing, the knowledge that was shared. And for women to understand that this happens and this can happen. And you know, when it happens, there's also a response. But it's not only about menopause, but it's about being able to communicate and hear. Because it is sad to be in a relationship with someone, and my view on sex is completely liberal compared to a lot of people. And I will take my licks for that. And St. Clair, Bishop, Bino, Bishop, I'm a liberalist when it comes to that. The things that I'm not saying that I'm far left, but I'm saying that the things that I struggle with, the fact that people struggle with these things, and I'm like, really?
Sorry, Marissa. I hear looking at Bishop Mark. Bishop Mark, get up.
Bishop Mark is contributed to my liberal mentality too.
We can pray for her husband. Just make sure her husband just call. We come together, just pray and anoint him.
Yeah, dude. Your name Jesus.
Whatever. but my thoughts are that the things that we see, I had an aunt who passed away. I'm Trinidad, and I say that and I always say this to my friend quietly. She spoke liberally and realistically about sexual intimacy. She did not hide it, and because of that, I was able then to understand that the things that we have hiccups about, we really should not have hiccups about. The expression of self between a man and a woman, we really should not have, because that's your husband, that's your wife, and to understand it. So if you say to your husband, this hurts, he should be able to understand, okay, this is not for her. And the fact is that if you understand different body structures, you will know that what will work for one person, maybe in your past, may not work for another person in your past that you're presently with. And as we say, communication is so key, because a lot of things that that people have done in their past with other partners, you know, you cannot do with this person now because you're dealing with someone else different. That's why we need to understand that it is a different level. And that whole thing that we talked about, as St. Clair just said, sex versus intimacy, people need to understand that is a completely different thing. You can have sex with so many people and never have experienced intimacy with them. And that's big. And I think that many people look for intimacy in multiple sexual partners, and they never find it. And that's key. People look for intimacy with multiple sexual partners, and it does not happen. And then when you meet someone who's not on that level, you've gone completely left. You especially in marriage, they find a great deficit there, because they're trying to have the experience that they had with people in the past now with their spouse. That's why I believe that we need to be cleansed, a clean slate, start fresh, and move from there, so that it's not abusive. And I was going somewhere with that. So it's not abusive. It's actually consensual. As Bishop Edison said, it's between two people who mutually love each other and seek to have that intimacy and seek to have that connection. I don't know about anybody else. If you've ever had that connection with someone, it is a beautiful thing. It is a very beautiful thing if you've experienced it with your spouse. Yeah, I know I just said, Sinclair. I know what I just said. All right, so we're coming to the end of our show right now, and as I know what I just said, Sinclair. All right, so all right, so we've come to the end of our show. So what else? What are we looking at next week? I think you talked about boundaries, and that's something that I think people need to understand. Bishop Mark did say that. We can look at that next week. Boundaries.
Maybe, it's very important.
And understanding that with your spouse.
Yeah.
And people, and someone asked me, really, are boundaries necessary in the bedroom when you're married?
Yeah, because remember, you're still in a relationship. You still got desires. You still got challenges. You still have.
Yes.
So that's exactly where it should be. Trust me, that's exactly where it should be. Because we sometimes, if you don't have boundaries, you start to take people for granted. You still have those misconceptions, and what happens is that you still got problems. So boundaries, full stop.
All right. So we're gonna look at boundaries.
Yes,
next
please.
week. So to all of you who are with us,
and
share that
just to say, boundaries is period in your life. You should have boundaries.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I remember hearing someone said boundaries keep things in and boundaries keep things out. Yes. I keep what's safe in and what you don't want in out. I heard that, and that's always stuck with me. So next week, Monday, we're looking at boundaries. Before you go, people like and share that video. We've been growing, and I must commend all of you who've been joining us Monday after Monday. We have been growing, and I believe that God is doing a great thing. And I'm sure if my mindset has been shifted just sitting here, I'm sure these gentlemen have also learned from each other just sitting here. So I know that you guys have also learned also. So I just want to say to you, hit that button, like, share. There's always the opportunity that someone else will grow. They will never say. Thanks to Sharon Mavis, Papa San. Good morning to Shante, Sandra, Nikita, Jason, all of you who've joined with us, Anita, and whether I called your name or not, and you're with us this morning, thank you so much for joining us this morning on today's show on Men on a Monday. Join us again next Monday. Thanks to Bishop Edison, Minister Sinclair, Bishop Mark for joining us this morning.
Man, God's first creation. Father, son, uncle, brother. On a journey of highs and lows, you were created in the image of God and given dominion in the earth, destined for great things and to fulfill purpose. Join us on Men on Monday as we discuss all issues related to men. We are unifying family, building